I never imagined that inheriting land from a great uncle, I barely remembered it would flip my quiet, predictable life upside down. One week, I was opening a stiff envelope from a law office, casually expecting some distant paperwork. The next, I was reading that I now owned 850 acres of untouched forest and meadow. Then came the real shock. Satellite images showed a massive luxury home sitting squarely in the center of that land. But what truly made my blood run cold was the name attached to it. The woman living there was the most infamous HOA president in the county, a Karen with reputation, so bad people whispered her name, and she was claiming the land was hers. It all started 3 months earlier, when the lawyer called me out of nowhere. My great-uncle Harold, a distant relative I'd met maybe twice at awkward family reunions when I was a kid, had passed away. No children, no close family. His will was simple and blunt. Everything went to me, all 850 acres in the rolling hills, just outside the rapidly expanding suburbs. Land that had stayed in our family for generations. The lawyer explained that developers were circling now, that the property was suddenly worth millions. I sat there in silence, stunned. I wasn't wealthy. I worked a normal job and rented a small apartment. Overnight, I became a landowner. I drove out to see the property the very next weekend. It was breathtaking. Towering old oak trees, a crystal-clear creek winding through the land, deer darting between the trees. It felt untouched and alive. I walked the boundaries using the survey map the lawyer had given me, heart pounding, feeling like I'd somehow won the lottery. That's when I noticed something strange. Fresh tire tracks leading off the dirt access road and straight into the heart of the land. Curious, I followed them, assuming maybe hunters or teenagers had been wandering around. The tracks led to a large, cleared area I didn't remember seeing on satellite photos from even a year earlier. And then I saw it. A massive 2-story modern mansion. All glass, sharp angles. A 3-car garage. Perfectly manicured landscaping that looked completely out of place in the middle of wild forest. Construction trailers still sat nearby. Workers were packing up tools. My stomach dropped. This couldn't be happening. I checked the map again. According to the coordinates, the house was built almost dead center on my 850 acres. The following Monday, I drove straight to the county records office. Building permits were public record. I pulled them up. The house was registered to a woman named Patricia Langford. The name hit me like a punch to the chest. Everyone in the surrounding neighborhoods knew Patricia. She was the president of the largest HOA in the area, infamous for finding homeowners over paint colors that were barely off, towing cars for parking inches over the line, and patrolling streets like she personally owned the town. People were terrified of her. They called her HOA Karen, behind her back, and prayed never to end up on her radar. And now she had built a mansion on my land. I confronted her that same week. Using public records, I found her previous address and drove to her old house, the one she'd apparently lived in before moving into the new monster build. She answered the door dressed in flawless workout gear, like she stepped straight out of a magazine. She looked at me like I was dirt stuck to her shoe. I introduced myself calmly and explained that according to the deed and survey, her new house was sitting on my inherited property. I even showed her the documents. Her reaction sent chills down my spine. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look worried. She smirked, actually smirked. Then she said, "Oh, honey, that land's been in dispute for years. My husband and I bought the rights fair and square from the previous owner before he passed. You're mistaken." I told her the previous owner was my great-uncle and that he had never sold anything. She laughed, told me to speak to her lawyer, and slammed the door in my face. I went home shaking. How could someone build $1 million house on land that wasn't theirs? I started digging deeper. I hired my own surveyor to verify everything. 2 weeks later, the report came back crystal clear. Her house, driveway, pool, everything was over 200 feet past the property line, deep into my acreage. But the real shock came next. Neighbors told me she'd been bragging for years at HOA meetings about her dream estate on her private land. Somehow, she'd gotten building permits approved for land she never owned. No one questioned her because she controlled the HOA with an iron fist. When I called the county planning department, the clerk went quiet before finally saying, "You're not the first person to complain about Mrs. Langford, but nothing ever sticks." I couldn't believe it. I'd inherited something incredible, and now this woman had planted herself right in the center of it, acting like she owned everything. I hired a lawyer immediately. I was ready to fight. What I didn't know was that Patricia Langford wasn't going down quietly, and what she did next left the entire county speechless. I filed the lawsuit the following week, a quiet title action and trespass claim, demanding the house be removed. My lawyer warned me Patricia didn't lose fights. She buried people in them. But my deeds went back over 100 years. Fresh surveys, clean paperwork. I thought it would be straightforward. I was wrong. 2 days after she was served, my phone started blowing up. Anonymous calls at 3 in the morning. Just heavy breathing. Emails from fake accounts calling me a greedy liar, trying to steal a widow's dream home. Patricia went dirty immediately. She posted in the HOA Facebook group, 5,000 members strong, claiming a fraudulent land grabber was harassing her. She attached blurry photos of herself standing in the woods, claiming she'd owned the land for years. Hundreds of comments poured in. People doxed my address. Threats started coming in. Then she showed up at my apartment. I opened the door one evening, and there she was, flanked by 2 large men in suits who looked like hired muscle. She smiled sweetly and said she wanted to talk privately. I let her in, not wanting a scene. That was a mistake. She sat on my couch like she owned it and laid out doctored satellite images. Fake boundary lines shifted in her favor, and forged purchase agreements with signatures eerily similar to my great-uncle's. She offered me $500,000 to drop the lawsuit. I laughed and said no. Her expression went cold. She leaned close and whispered, "You have no idea who you're messing with. I've ruined better men than you." The harassment escalated fast. My tires were slashed twice in 1 week. My boss called me into his office after receiving an anonymous letter accusing me of real estate fraud. I stopped sleeping. Every noise made me jump. And that was only the beginning. The harassment didn't stop. My lawyer explained this was classic intimidation, but proving it was Patricia was nearly impossible. She was careful. Burners, proxies, hiding behind layers of anonymity. Then came the countersuit. She didn't just defend herself. She attacked. She claimed adverse possession, insisting her family had been using the land for decades, even though no one had ever seen them there. She presented witnesses, HOA board members, swearing under oath they had picnicked on her property for years. One even brought photos with old timestamps. My lawyer zoomed in and immediately noticed the shadows were all wrong. The photos were clearly faked, but somehow the judge allowed them into evidence. I left the courtroom shaking. Then came discovery. Her lawyer demanded every document about my great-uncle's estate. Days later, a local news site ran a hit piece. Local man sues grieving widow over land. Was the will even valid? They quoted unnamed sources claiming Uncle Harold had dementia and that I had manipulated him. Total lies. I hadn't even spoken to him in the last 10 years of his life. But the comments were brutal. Threats, harassment. I had to shut down all my social media accounts. Patricia escalated further. She threw a massive housewarming party at the illegal mansion, inviting the entire HOA, county officials, even the sheriff. Drone footage someone sent me showed strings of lights, live music, hundreds of cars parked on my land. She gave a speech on the deck about how she defended her land against a vicious claim and turned the forest into her dream home. People cheered. The video went viral in local Facebook groups. She painted herself as a victim. Me, the villain. I hit rock bottom one night, driving home. I pulled over and just cried. This woman had stolen part of my inheritance, built her dream house, and the whole county now believed her version of the story. My lawyer reassured me we had the stronger case, but every day felt like drowning. Then, suddenly, everything shifted. One morning, he called me frantic. The judge had fast-tracked a hearing after new evidence surfaced. Patricia had made a major mistake. She'd gotten overconfident and filed additional documents to strengthen her claim, documents that would ultimately blow everything wide open. The morning of the final hearing, I walked into the courtroom exhausted, feeling like a ghost. Months of harassment had left me drained. My lawyer squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "Today it ends." Patricia strutted in like she owned the place. Designer suit, perfect hair, surrounded by a high-paid legal team. She didn't even glance at me. Confident, untouchable. The judge called the case, and things moved fast. My side relied on surveys, original deeds, and the fact no sale had ever occurred. Her side leaned heavily on adverse possession and the questionable witness statements. Then her lawyer dropped what they thought would be the killer blow, a newly discovered addendum to my great-uncle's will. He waved a document claiming Uncle Harold had promised the central 50 acres to Patricia's late husband years ago as payment for an old business debt. The paper looked legitimate. Seal, notary, everything. Patricia finally smirked at me, clearly thinking she'd won. My lawyer requested a 10-minute recess to review it. We huddled in the hallway, tense. Then his eyes lit up. A quick call to the private investigator we'd hired weeks earlier. Patricia had no idea. And 5 minutes later, a single photo arrived via text. My heart raced. When court resumed, my lawyer asked to recall Patricia for one final question. The judge allowed it. He held up the addendum and asked calmly, "Mrs. Langford, can you explain why the notary stamp on this document is dated 3 months after the notary passed away?" The courtroom fell silent. Patricia froze. She stammered something about a clerical error, but the judge wasn't buying it. My lawyer projected the PI's photo on the screen. Security footage from the county clerk's office, showing Patricia submitting the addendum herself just 2 weeks prior. Then the real hammer dropped. The PI had traced her finances. Her late husband had never had any dealings with Uncle Harold. In fact, he had died 15 years before the alleged debt. Even worse, Patricia had been quietly moving fake survey markers around the property for years, attempting to shift boundaries bit by bit. She thought that building quickly and intimidating neighbors would prevent anyone from challenging her. The reason she wanted the land was greed, not a dream house. Developers had approached her months earlier with a massive offer, tens of millions, to turn the 850 acres into a luxury golf resort. She would have been the middleman, pocketing a huge finder's fee and first pick of the lots. She had assumed Uncle Harold's isolation meant the land would go unclaimed. When I inherited it instead, she panicked and doubled down. Fraudulent documents, harassment, intimidation. The judge's face hardened. He didn't even let her lawyers respond. He ruled on the spot. Title confirmed to me. Permanent injunction against Patricia. The house? Illegal encroachment. Immediate demolition at her expense within 30 days. No appeals would stay the order due to proven fraud. Patricia screamed in court, flailed, called the judge biased, threatened everyone. Bailiffs had to escort her out as she kicked and wailed. The video of her meltdown went viral that afternoon. HOA Karen finally undone by her own lies. 3 weeks later, I stood on the hill watching demolition crews tear the mansion down brick by brick. Patricia lost everything. The house, her reputation, her HOA presidency. She even faced criminal charges for forgery and perjury. I sold most of the land to a conservation group, keeping it wild and making enough to change my life without destroying my great-uncle's legacy. Sometimes at sunset, I walk the meadow where her house once stood. The quiet is back, and I realized a true inheritance wasn't just a land. It was a lesson that no one, no matter how powerful, can steal what's yours. Watching that wrecking ball swing, best therapy ever. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe. Every subscription fuels more dramatic HOA battles. Don't forget the bell icon. You won't want to miss the next story where justice is even sweeter.